United States Department of Agriculture.
So joining us for our fourth webinar in our series on transdisciplinary approaches. My name is Jessica Shade. I'm a national program leader at USDA NIFA. I'm one of the organizers of the transdisciplinary webinar series. Although for putting this webinar together goes to Frank Lake, who I am going to be passing over the mic to in just a few minutes. He's going to be moderating today. So what the series sets out to do is highlight the opportunities and challenges of transdisciplinary approaches within agricultural research. So if you go to the next slide, perfect. One back. We always include our non-discrimination statement in our decks because there's zero tolerance for discrimination at these events. This slide has contact information if you'd like to make a complaint. So if you go to the next slide, for those of you who aren't familiar with transdisciplinary approaches, or if you just want to learn a little more about the what and why of using transdisciplinary approaches, check out the recordings of our past webinars, which you can view on this NAL National Ag Library website. So that's the link. And then there's a QR code that will take you there as well. We have all of the past webinars recorded and you can view them. All right, next slide. We also are planning another webinar in this series for September, focused on effective integration of extension with research. We don't have a registration page up yet, but I'll email it to everyone once we do. And I am co-organizing the webinar with another national program leader here at NIFA, Ashley Mueller, and Doug Steele, the VP for Food, Ag, and Natural Resources at the Association of Public Land Grant Universities. Next slide. And please stick around after the presentation because we have an evaluation pool where you can help us improve our webinars for the future and help identify topic areas that you'd be interested in seeing us focus on in the future. All right, next slide. All right, we can actually stop sharing. So today we're going to be looking at tribal research partnerships, agroforestry, food security, and sovereignty. Several people who work in the transdisciplinary space have flagged that research done hand in hand with Native nations can represent a gold standard for the use of transdisciplinary approaches. So before I hand it over to Frank, I'm going to pass the mic to Erin Riley, a national program leader in NIFA's Division of Community and Education, who leads NIFA tribal programs. So Erin, I'll pass the mic to you.
Great, thank you. Can you see my slides or is it showing up in notes screen?
Looks great.
Okay. So I want to say a big thank you to Jessica and Frank for inviting me to talk a little bit about the 1994 land grant colleges and universities and the programs in which NIFA has that serves the 1994s. These are the tribal colleges that USDA provides funding to, and there's 35. You can see that they're listed here, and they range mostly around the United States, but the generally the majority of them you can see are in the central part of the United States going into the Southwest. We have one of our tribal colleges in the Northwest Indian College, but we don't have any tribal colleges on the East Coast. So it's an interesting geographical pattern if you'll look, and I'll talk a little bit about the programs that NIFA has and how we try to cover all of those particular areas within the United States when it comes to tribes and tribal colleges. So I'm just going to go over high level the tribal programs that we have. The Tribal Colleges Endowment Program is a formula-based program that it is split between Indian student count as well as evenly across the board. So depending on how many students are enrolled within the tribal colleges, as well as a general amount, that particular funding is split every year and they get it annually. These are considered, they are interest on federal money. So the interest is split up every single year, and they have a lot of leeway with this program. So they can pay for lights, they can pay for rental space, they can pay for trucks, cars, different things such as that, buildings. The next program that we have is the Tribal College Equity and Education Program. This is available to the 35 tribal colleges, and this is for education purposes. It can pay for staff, it can pay for platforms to teach the students on, textbooks, different things such as that. The Tribal Colleges Extension Capacity Program and Special Emphasis Program really works in the communities that the tribal colleges are located on, and it does a lot of cultural-based education for the community. Some of them do some horse programming, some of them do moccasin making, pottery making. It's a great program that really works in extension as well as gardening, food sovereignty. The Tribal Colleges Research Grant Program is a program that was developed in 2008, and it's building the research capacity within the 1994s. This program, it is funded this year at about $7.5 million. And I'm going to put that link after I'm done talking into the chat box. So this is a fantastic program if tribal colleges have students that they would like to get some really great hands-on research experience. The New Beginnings for Tribal Students program is our newest program. This was developed in 2020. And the intent of this program is to graduate tribal students with land grant degrees. So this program is available to not only 1994s, but it's available to 1862s, and it's available to 1890s. So this is one of those programs that really helps extend not only just the 1994 portfolio and funding, but it extends across the United States. So we fund programs in Maine, we fund Cornell with this program, we fund Virginia Tech with this program, as well as other schools that don't have 1994s and states that don't have 1994s. And then the last program that I'm going to talk about is the Federally Recognized Tribes Extension Program, which the 1994s were included in this in the 2018 Farm Bill. So this program is also eligible to the 1862s, the 1890s, and the 1994s. And it puts extension agents on reservations so that they can work with communities on food sovereignty, ag production. There's a lot of different focus areas. This is where the majority of our 4-H programs on tribal communities is occurring, is in the FERTEP or Federally Recognized Tribes Extension Program. So with that, I'm not going to go into great detail, but if you have more, if you have questions or would like to know more information about these programs, please reach out to me. I'm going to put a couple of open requests for applications into the chat box for everybody. And again, I would like to give a big thank you to Jessica and Frank for inviting me on here. And I look forward to hearing the rest of this webinar and this presentation. So welcome and thanks for joining today.
Thank you, Erin. I'm going to go ahead and try to select the right screen now and do this for us. Yeah, good. One. Go over. Hopefully we'll get this right this time. Okay. All right. Do you see the speaker slide? Yes? Okay. Well, thank you again. My name is Frank Kanawha Lake. I'm a USDA Forest Service Research Ecologist and the Pacific Southwest Research Station Tribal Liaison. And I'm the moderator and a co-organizer today for this. And what I'd like to do now is introduce our speakers. And then after that, I'm going to give a brief overview of what is tribal or indigenous agroforestry in the context of my work with our presenters. So first of all, today we have Dr. Jennifer Sauerwein. She's an associate professor at the Cooperative Extension in the Department of Environmental Science, Policy, and Management at UC Berkeley. And she's the co-founder of the Karuk UC Berkeley Collaborative and affiliated faculty at Berkeley Food Institute. Her research and extension programs engage diverse stakeholders across food systems to examine barriers and co-create solutions to achieve healthy, equitable, current relevant, and sustainable food systems under changing climatic conditions. In partnership with tribes, immigrant, and urban communities, she examines the cultural politics of resource access and governance and the relationship between biocultural diversity, food security, food sovereignty, and health. And it's been a pleasure to work with Jenny on many of our projects. Our next speaker after Jenny will be Vicki Preston. She's Karuk, Yurok, Paiute Pit River, an auntie, an artist, and community member. She lives in the area of Perch Creek, which is near the town of Orleans or Panumnet, California, in Northwest California. Vicki grew up in and around Orleans and lived mostly at Red Cap Creek, where her grandparents have their home. She works as a cultural resource technician at the Karuk Department of Natural Resources, a job which incorporates archaeology and traditional ecological knowledge into resource management, and much of her work is about restoring cultural burning practices to Karuk Aboriginal territory. Vicki holds a Master of Arts in Environmental and Community from Humboldt State University, and she's also one of the leading practitioners for the Klamath River Indigenous Women's Treks. Our next speaker, and also an honor to have and work with Vicki and Heather, is Heather Ricard, the Plants Division Coordinator at the Karuk Department of Natural Resources. Heather is the coordinator for the Pitish Plants Division for the Karuk tribe, where she's part of building plants created related restoration and monitoring capacity with collaborators. She has been involved in the Klamath River Food Basin Security Initiative, prescribed fire effects, monitoring, and K-12 environmental education on behalf of the Karuk tribe. Heather holds a Master's of Natural Resources from Cal Poly Humboldt, Department of Forestry, Fire Range Management, with a research focus on legacy hardwood mortality following low intensity prescribed fire. I was also one of our committee members, and it's been a pleasure to work with Heather for years on and off on fires and cultural related work. Next, we have Kathy McCovey. Kathy is a cultural practitioner and NIFA AFRI and other food security project mentor and research partner. She's also the co-director of the Mid-Klamath Watershed Council, one of our local partners there in the Orleans area. She's formerly a Forest Service archaeologist and forest ecologist, now serving with the Mid-Klamath Watershed Council, and has worked very much closely with the Karuk tribe and UC Berkeley Collaborative and other research and practices in the area. And last but not least, we have Stephanie Gutierrez, another great colleague of mine, and glad to have her here, is the Forest and Community Program Director at EcoTrust, the current Principal Investigator and the lead for our NAFRI-funded Northwest Tribal Agroforestry Project. Stephanie is San Carlos Apache. She's the Forest and Community Program Director at EcoTrust. She works closely with tribes across the Pacific Northwest to center community-engaged decision-making and Indigenous knowledge systems in forest planning and management. She also leads a growing body of work around tribal forestry, workforce development, Indigenous science and forest education, and Indigenous agroforestry. At the root of her work, Stephanie is dedicated to increasing access, representation, and decision-making for Black, Indigenous, and people of color and women, non-binary, and two-spirit individuals in forestry. And Stephanie, it's great to have you along. Now, and I would like someone to chime in. Yeah.
Before we move on, we're still seeing the, we're not seeing the presentation mode.
Okay, let's try this one last time. How about that one now, finally? Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All righty. We're going to get through this. So, you know, for us, kind of mostly, I work closely with the National Agroforestry Center, and we all have. And so agroforestry is the intentional integration of trees or shrubs with crops and other animal production to create environmental, economic, and social benefits. And there's a series of practices that we'll talk about briefly. But tribal or indigenous agroforestry, as we work collectively to kind of define that and describe it and work through it, is agriculture, forestry, and wildland fire management, which includes culturally informed, traditional ecological knowledge or indigenous knowledge-based practices that integrate the management of trees, plants, fungi, and animals to serve the needs of indigenous communities, tribes, and their broader society. A lot of my work with our presenters here today has been this approach of looking at tribal agroforestry and climate adaptation, but centered on that very much for tribes as fire-dependent cultures living in fire-prone areas, particularly here in the Pacific West, is this focus of these agroforestry practices indigenized around indigenous fire stewardship. And so that can be civil pasture, forest farming, windbreaks, alley cropping, agroforest, or riparian buffers are all a mix of those different practices, but through an Indigenous cultural perspective. And so for us, it's the intentional selection of those cultural use plants, fungi, and animals, whether they're domestic, cultivars, or wild genetic variants, that can increase the resistance and resilience of the environment and human communities through agroforestry management. Those strategies will increase the adaptive capacity of our socio-ecological systems. And I'm really excited to have our presenters talk about that today. A lot of our work is kind of depicting from a degraded, often indigenously excluded environment to look at what would that socio-ecological resilience in agroforestry or indigenous agroforestry look like. For us, we often use depictions. This is from Kirsten Vignetta, one of our colleagues. You see a black oak and other California forest type on the lower left. And then for the Columbia Basin Plateau area, another example there up on the right. But a lot of these focus particularly on this work around the mature trees, especially hardwoods and pines or other fire-adapted drought-tolerant species, around meadows and riparian areas, ridgeline or trail systems that are important historically as well as today, moving out from the village or camps or our towns and communities, and really having that indigenous knowledge inform that ecocultural revitalization and related to climate adaptation, food security, basketry, and other measures. At the end, I'll come back to this resources page, but there's a lot of work that we've done that we've co-published and co-produced together. And each speaker will talk a little bit about this, but we do have that and we'll make that available to our participants. And then lastly, for a lot of my work, and I was really honored by having the Association for Temperate Agroforestry Researcher Award a couple of years ago by my work with many of the folks here today. And I'm just merely a translator and a talker, and I'll bring it on to them now. So with that, let's please welcome Dr. Jennifer Sauerwein, and Jenny, you can start us off. Oh, stop share and bring in.
Thank you so much, Frank. Let me start by sharing my screen. All right, how's that look? Okay, well, again, thank you so much for the incredible introduction and the warm welcome. It's just been such a pleasure working with you, Frank. I'm super grateful to have this opportunity to join you all today. And greetings from Berkeley, or Huchun, the ancestral and unceded lands of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. Today, I'm honored to share with you all about an ongoing research partnership with the Kuduk tribe working to enhance Indigenous food sovereignty and agroecological resilience in the Klamath River Basin of Northern California. And I'm especially delighted to share space with dear colleagues from the Kuduk tribe who've been incredible partners in this journey. So this picture just wanted to share with you is of our final NIFA Food Security Project partner meeting at the headwaters of the Klamath River, which I'll talk about shortly. But first, I want to start by describing how our partnership came together, some of the challenges that we're working to address, and some of the key principles that guide our collaborative projects. I'll then move on to share some reflections on the benefits of tribal partnerships in NIFA-funded projects in both the research and extension domains. So first, a little bit of history. In the early 2000s, my husband, Tom Carlson, and I had the privilege and honor of meeting Ron Reed, a Kuduk traditional dip net fisherman on the Salmon River in Northern California, who shared with us about his life and the challenges the Kuduk tribal community was facing with regards to food insecurity, a variety of health challenges, limited youth opportunities, and the ongoing impact of extractive industries on the lives and livelihoods of the Kuduk people, all of which are legacies of settler colonialism. He also shared with us their hopes, dreams, desires, and actions to restore their fisheries and cultural foodscapes. So after several years of listening and learning and forming a strong friendship, we co-founded the Kuduk Berkeley Collaborative in 2007, leveraging the resources of Berkeley to support tribal goals and priorities to strengthen food sovereignty and ecocultural revitalization efforts, really centering youth enrichment programs, and we made a commitment to seek funds to support these efforts. So now I'd like to share some of the key guiding principles that have framed our collaborative work in really fundamental ways, and beginning with some important acknowledgements. First and foremost, it's important to acknowledge the harms that have been caused by academic researchers and institutions in Native communities, including but not limited to the long history of extractive research, resulting in museum holdings of tribal ancestors and cultural belongings, and the very fact that our land-grant institutions were founded on the sale of stolen Indigenous lands, which we continue to benefit from today. We also acknowledge the important role that Western science has played more broadly in silencing and at times criminalizing Indigenous practices and ways of knowing. And just as an example, we can see in the legacy of scientific forestry, which outlawed Indigenous burning, really centering fire exclusion and suppression to promote timber production, all of which resulted in the dramatic decline in the quality and abundance of cultural foods and fibers and other cultural resources, and also has led to this increase in catastrophic fires that we're experiencing here in the West. So I want to take note that because of this history, it takes time to build trust by listening and by learning, by decentering the role of the university as the expert and centering Indigenous knowledge, science, and expertise. A really important part of our collaborative has been the co-creation of a tribal research protocol in 2013 with tribal oversight that governs all the work we do, ensuring that our research benefits the tribes and their communities and ensures tribal sovereignty over knowledge and data. Given this long history of data extraction, as explained earlier, we work to support co-ownership of data and have helped purchase a server for the tribe to be able to store and protect their data. All of our work is really rooted in the principles of community-based participatory research and Indigenous methodologies, which ensure that the communities are engaged throughout the process in decision-making and ownership through all stages. And finally, I just want to take a moment to reflect on working together on developing grants. So it's really critical to engage early and often, start the idea generation long before the RFP is released, really co-creating what the project will be about from the very beginning, and really taking time to integrate Indigenous and Western science perspectives and values. And also, it's important to engage our tribal colleagues as research partners with co-PI status and equitable funding. So now I'm going to shift to talk briefly about our NIFA food security project, highlighting how partnering with and centering Indigenous perspectives not only generates better science, but also more meaningful and impactful outcomes. So our food security project sought to better understand the experience and predictors of Native American food insecurity and identify tribal-led solutions to enhance tribal health and food sovereignty. We took a full year to develop our goals and objectives, partnering with local nonprofits, 3 tribes, the Forest Service, and Berkeley researchers. We juggled lots of different priorities, ultimately landing on 43 objectives, with the majority of the funding of $4 million dedicated to the tribes to support their equitable participation in the research project over 5 years. As you can see here, we had a number of different sort of buckets of work, including policy analysis, a native food system assessment, which I'll talk about in a minute, that really centers Indigenous voices because most food system assessments excluded Indigenous perspectives. We also invested in regional capacity building, helping to build infrastructure, curriculum, established a tribal herbaria, digital library, and also the Pikya Field Research Institute, which is continuing to this day. There's also important investments in community-led food production and food subsistence activities. You can see some of them here. And we also supported the enhanced productivity and exchange of native foods. Now, all of these outreach and extension activities were co-created by our tribal partners and led by them. Go to the next slide. Okay, so now for our research on the Native Food System Assessment, we adapted the USDA Household Food Security module to include cultural measures of food security that were brought to us by our tribal partners. We administered the survey to 4 tribes in the Klamath Basin and had over 700 responses. We integrated key cultural variables, again, identified by our partners, including intergenerational knowledge sharing, access to and sharing of native foods, as well as community-identified barriers and solutions to native food access. And what we found through our analysis was that access to native foods was strongly predictive of food security. And I want to just highlight the importance of how integrating questions about native foods, we were able to gain new insights into the experience, causes, and tribal-led solutions to food insecurity that conventional assessments would have missed. We found that Native foods are central to restoring the physical, cultural, and overall health and well-being among Native communities, as well as sovereignty over their food systems. Yet at the same time, more than 70% of all the households who responded stated that they never or rarely get the Native foods that they want due to primarily land degradation and policy barriers. So these findings suggest the need to work toward removing these policy barriers to strengthen ecocultural revitalization efforts. So building on those findings, we were able to launch a follow-up NIFA project, again, working with Frank and cultural practitioners, Kathy McCovey and Vicki Preston, who are on the call, as well as Lisa Hillman, and also Heather, to set up long-term monitoring plots. The goal was to assess the condition, quality, and abundance of cultural foods and fibers and how they're responding to climate change and land management. Our ultimate goal in this project is to support improved land management decisions in the Karuk ancestral territory that enhance the quality and consumption of culturally significant foods, as well as the stewardship practices that sustain them. Again, in this project, we found that the Indigenous ecological knowledge brought forward from Kathy and Vicki and Lisa, that knowledge about the plants and their relations, the climate stressors impacting those plants, and their knowledge about the history of the land proved critical to our understanding of the condition, the threats, and also the strategies to enhance the viability of culturally significant species. So I'd like to conclude with just highlighting some of the key benefits of tribal partnerships. We found that by engaging tribal partners in the design, implementation, and evaluation of both the research and extension projects strengthened our project relationships. It enhanced the impacts of our work. It really supported the sustainability of our programs and also upheld tribal self-determination. This kind of participatory research really allows communities to be at the center of the research, and they are the producers of the knowledge, defining the questions, interpreting the results, and making decisions in real time about what to do with those results. It brings power and control of data back into the hands of the community, working towards reversing that extractive research model. On the academic side, we had an increased understanding of traditional ecological knowledge and also the ways in which Indigenous science helps to generate more robust and relevant research questions, data, and outcomes. A big part of our work with funding tribal experts to teach the workshops on Native food gathering, processing, storytelling, and restoration not only led to increased food security and self-reliance, but also had impacts related to increase in cultural pride and mental health. It strengthened intergenerational knowledge sharing and relationships, upholding their culture and restoring their landscapes. So over the course of 4 years, we had 1,300 events, more or less, and we conducted an evaluation at the end where 94% of returning participants stated that they actually applied the knowledge and skills in the food subsistence workshops that they had participated in. And finally, I'd like to just share that because of the co-creation of our project together, we're seeing many enduring impacts of the products we created, including the various assessment tools, the curricula, which continue to be taught in the schools today, a number of reports, guides, revitalized orchards, and also a number of different valuable infrastructure, as mentioned earlier about the herbaria, the digital library, and also the Pikyaf Field Institute. So of course, we have lots more to share, but I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. And if you'd like to learn more, you can go to our Karuk Tribe UC Berkeley Collaborative website. Here's a couple of reports. We have publications there. And again, it's just been such an honor to be able to collaborate with all of these wonderful colleagues who you'll be hearing from more next. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. That was wonderful. Please, if you have any questions for Jennifer, we're going to come back to a question and answer session at the end. So at this point, I'd like to invite Vicki, Heather, and Kathy to come on and share your screen and come on in. But thank you, Jennifer.
Frank, I just want to flag that some people are noting we are having trouble viewing the interpreters. So just know that we are working behind the scenes to try and change the view so that everyone has access to viewing both the slides and the interpreter at the same time. It looks like it's still not working. Pamela, just flagging that. I know you've been trying some other settings.
Okay. Well, thank you for that update. And we do try to honor that ADA part of it. So thanks. Vicky, would you like to go ahead? I see you're loading your screen. Hopefully internet bandwidth is there fine in the back country.
Yes, can y'all hear me? Just
I can hear you and see you, but your slides are loading. from
oh,
Google
they're
Docs.
loading.
Yeah, it
Okay.
still says loading.
Oh, okay.
Well, while it's
Okay.
loading, go ahead and introduce yourself, or you can get started, and I'll let you know what we see on our side.
Okay. Yeah, let me know if it loads or not. But yeah, Ayuki, my name's Vicky Preston. Over here at the Kaduk Tribe Department of Natural Resources with Kathy and Heather. Thanks, Jenny. That was a really great presentation. I think that between yours and looking through our slides, it's really been like a really great blast from the past to see this progression. And, you know, while I've been here at DNR and then long before as a community member or youth, like participating in the various events that has been taking place in this community, it's really cool to see like this progression and kind of like learning process unfold. So yeah, is the slides loaded now or?
It still says loading, so hopefully.
Okay. Oops. Can you see the
We can see that, but it just has the panel of the next slides, but we can still see your tribal research partnerships, your first slide.
does it look like anything now?
Nope, it says loading again. It doesn't like going to so you might have to just do it like that, where you just
Okay.
have your transition, or if you can move your bar over to the side and minimize the next slides that you see in the sequence. But we can see your other slide. There you go. That's a little better. Yeah.
Okay.
And
That
now we can see your main slide. And if you
Okay,
want to
that
advance, you
looks
can see if it works.
Okay, well, we'll just have to scroll through then. Just letting my
Yep.
folks.
Being adaptive, right? Get through it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Here in Orleans, so folks really understand, like, yeah, our Wi-Fi and our resources here are very minimal. Like the town here is like we don't have cell service and we don't have a lot of like facilities. So here at DNR we have like the best facilities really, but it's like our town is like 600 to 700 people. It's pretty small. So yeah, so just here gonna kick off our presentation. My name is Vicky Preston. Heather and Kathy and myself have really kind of worked to come up with this presentation together. So here's some pictures of us over the years, just kind of working and doing different things here at DNR, Department of Natural Resources here at the Kaduk Tribe. I'm going to refer to it very often as DNR. Working with different partners like Frank and with Jenny and just like when you're working here at DNR, working with a lot of partners, whether that be research, whether that be agency or nonprofit, community. There's a lot of interaction with different folks that really comes into this question of partnering and research. And a huge piece of that for us is really community engagement. And as someone who, as you know, Frank had introduced, I grew up here in this community and in this tribal community. And so that really was the big driver for why I even wanted to work at DNR in the first place. And, you know, attending these events within the community and seeing that, you know, it really was community iterative and community, you know, community generating the needs for driving these projects is really even why I wanted to get involved in this work in the first place. So, oops. Let me just make sure. Okay. So I did want to kind of touch on for my time here, just kind of going over some things that Jenny also kind of mentioned, which is best practices and what is this tribal collaboration process. And I'll refer to this tribal collaboration because what we do is with research and with researchers, but it's also really with just like all kinds of partners, like I mentioned, agencies, nonprofits, community. Yeah, there's all sorts of collaborations that go on. research is a huge thing, and we have a department here at the Kuduk Tribe, the Pikyao Field Institute, folks like Asia Conrad, Shay Bork, Colleen Rozier, really field a lot of our the research requests that come in. And yeah, I'll talk more about that as we kind of work through some of these things that I've put in these slides. But what Jenny had mentioned and what I'll reiterate is like tribal collaboration is really important to be a part of the process from the inception of the idea of wanting to build a project, and the really reforming and redoing, making better this process that as Jenny had mentioned over the years and the decades has not been tribal centered or beneficial. A lot of research in the past that wasn't part of the intent was for them to really benefit tribes and tribal communities. But in order to really benefit our communities, we need to be a part of the process. We need to help create the process. And we really need to be okay, from the beginning, from when we decide on the project, we need to feel okay with it within ourselves and with the vetting through this process as we move through the project to the end. And that's super important. And that's something that with researchers, even though we create a project, along the way, we need to continue to feel like it's fitting into this process the whole way. So that means reevaluating as we go. And that can often be hard, and that often, might not be within the scope you think of in the beginning. And it means that things can evolve. And I think back to the agroecosystems assessment, the ACA project that we did with Jenny in the last 5 years. Kathy and I worked with Jenny and other folks at Berkeley, Megan Muchioki and Dan Sarna and other folks. And yeah, it was like coming in to do the climate change assessments, doing a lot of field work, and then reevaluating how we felt about the metrics that we had decided on. And I remember at one point being like, we thought we were going to do these metrics. We went out, we started doing the plots. And I remember coming back and having this conversation around like, well, how, in a tribally centered way, how can we really evaluate how these plants are doing? Like in our minds as gatherers and as tribal people, we have to be able to work with the plants or see like besides just being able to visually or count the plants, like if we're weaving with them, are they even good quality for weaving? Are they strong? Are they supple? Are they actually like healthy when you actually start working with them? And I think that was a new metric that we evolved to create within the process for these different plants. And that's part of this kind of flexibility that needs to be built into the process, that I think researchers and other partners need to understand is that working with tribes in a proper way really means like listening and being able to change, to adapt, to really benefit these places in a way that's engaged with Indigenous management practices. So yeah, working to understand the tribe's research priorities. We have the tribe here, the Kuduk tribe has priorities here that center Kuduk people. Kuduk priorities mean knowing what our communities need. Are we talking like direct what's the word? Like, sometimes community need is like a mutual aid is a direct impact. Like, is there housing needs? Is there food security needs? Are there gathering area needs? Like what are the needs of our individual communities, communities of people? Those are questions that, because we are small communities, especially like are very like centered at our research needs. What are they aligning with our understanding of that we have of place-based and ecosystem benefits? Are we able to connect with gatherers who are able to talk about us, like how the willows are growing, how have they grown there in the past? Is there a need for them to be healthy and gatherable? And is that really connected? Like, is that what does that say for that ecosystem, and is it in need of invasive species management, et cetera. And yeah, Kaduk priorities really are for the benefit of future generation, continuance of Kaduk culture, people, and places. And so those are always going to be like the backbone of why we have research priority and needs. Oh my God. Okay. My scroller is really good, too good. Okay. So so Kaduk Tribe has protocols for working with outside partners and researchers, which are for reaching out to the Kaduk Tribe are really fielded through the Pikyao Field Institute here at the Kaduk Department of Natural Resources, for involving research projects involving the Kaduk Tribe and the environment. And the Kaduk Tribe has really worked through work with partners over the years to refine this process. The Pikyao, we have protocols, and we have those folks that I'd mentioned before, Shay, Colleen, Asia, who work within the department to help field and help researchers. But it's a process that's also changing, and it's getting better as we work as well still. So, and I think it's important to recognize that, like, where the Kaduk Tribe is working to better that, and has worked for many years to really refine that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that all tribes are the same, and that working with tribal communities, each community is going to have, similar or very different needs or capacities. And I feel like varying levels of want to work with researchers or experience with that. So I think that, we're lying on one part of the spectrum, and I don't think that you can not assume that all tribes are at this same level. And I think that each tribe has to speak for themselves. And there might be times where, the Kaduk Tribe is like, we don't have the capacity, or it's not a priority to work with researchers right now. It fluctuates even month to month. And I think that it's really hard, and it's hard for us, but it is like a essential for us to really evaluate our capacity along with our community's capacity to hold researchers. Because when we call people in, it affects us here at work, but it does affect our community too, because we're going to outreach to them to help with researchers to be involved in certain ways. So it is part of us also really evaluating that need for our community. And just, talking about that, yeah, tribes are not like larger agencies or institutions, and that we have limited capacity sometimes. So yeah, a lot of those kind of general discussions is kind of like a basis for jumping into some of our discussions here about the Kaduk Tribe generating community and community implemented work here, work that Jenny's mentioned in a lot of these in her presentation, and that Heather and others will kind of continue to talk about. This being one of our many events over the years, and really like jumping in and using like the study from the food security surveys to then from the community to create events that the community wants and needs. Like events like here in this picture, to really, if there is a food security need, if they're like, what does that entail? And maybe that entails learning about basket weaving, learning about acorn cooking and gathering, and going out with large groups to gather and learning about place. So I think I want to pass it off to Heather to kind of talk about some of our projects here, if that's okay.
Yep, thanks, Vicki. You're at about 12 minutes, so good job. Thank you.
Double fingers. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm here with Vicki and Kathy in the room, and privileged to get the chance to talk to you all today. Yeah, thanks so much, Vicki. It's really been fun just in anticipation of this project, kind of like Vicki said, kind of going down memory lane to the years that we have worked together. As Frank introduced me, my name is Heather. I've worked for Kaduk DNR since I started in 2015 with the Food Security Project, and have had the privilege of working for the tribe and being on Kaduk lands a little before that. And so right here, Vicky found this photo. This is, I'm over here on the left. This is a part of a project that we did where we did some some Karuk bilingual plays in the schools, largely led by Lisa Hillman, who has been a huge part of securing so much grant funding and building capacity here at Karuk DNR that I want to acknowledge and that we have learned so much from. And so I thought with my time, I dug up some photos. I wanted to kind of just share, and I've just been thinking about what it is to, with some of these research partnerships, have the opportunity to build meaningful capacity, the kind that we really feel within the community and within the work that we're trying to do here. I know it comes up a lot. As Vicky mentioned, we get so many, a lot of researchers are reaching out right now. I believe there's 24 projects that that Shay, our colleague Shay Bork, is managing. And then we just get all kinds of other contacts from people. And so when people wonder, what does meaningful collaboration look like? I feel like this UC Berkeley Collaborative is a great example. And so I had the opportunity to come into this food security project in 2015, already a couple years in. And, you know, I just wanted to share some of the examples of some of the work that we did. So here you see myself and Chuk, who was working in Agroforestry. We're out with the youth crew, and we had the opportunity to establish food groves in this landscape level project, which Kathy was a part of, and in order to kind of establish long-term or plots to measure change, but biased toward cultural species and uses, and using some metrics like Vicky talked about. So those were in addition to the forestry plots. And yeah, we included as many people in the community as we could, especially youth. So Lisa was able to leverage this food security project to start the Pikyao Field Institute, Pikyao being a word for fix it, to remake, and that, which is the environmental education sort of branch now, or program within Karuk DNR. Within that, we were able to keep some of the food security workshops, community workshops around certain species, and youth engagement and curriculum development as part of that. So here we have some folks gathering maple bark, and this was part, and then some youth illustrations of a play that Vicky and I and Lisa collaborated on. Again, just some examples of how we kind of returned. These are in areas that had burned, and we had the chance to revisit, to gather medicine and hazel in this case, with elders not here pictured, but with some youth, and who are now working with us as colleagues in this very office. Actually, some of these people pictured. Some of the other deliverables we've already kind of mentioned is that we were able to, focus a lot of our attention in areas where we had burned, and identify those places that we wanted to actively manage, that would be good sites for community gathering, and or to, support gatherers that already had relationships to these places. Here, Kathy and I found a nice tea patch after one of our prescribed burns. And then also our colleague and friend, Stormy Palmatier, was a collaborator in a follow-up farm to school project where we got to bring traditional foods that largely collected in post-fire areas into the schools. We are also able to leverage some of this funding to participate in local prescribed fire projects like Klamath River Treks. So again, this is sort of going back. Vicki and I had the chance to participate in actual burning and gain training with prescribed fire monitoring. Again, that we also did include the youth in. And so I thought it might be helpful just to kind of map out how this food security project, that my experience, really helped initiate these other projects and relationships, but again, meaningful capacity. So this funded several full-time positions. I'm sure Jennifer remembers more specifically, but has been able to start from a couple technicians that we all work together as a team here and kind of build into these full-on programs with different divisions and coordinators and technicians under that. So you can see, so here's the project, and over here to the right, these colored boxes are kind of some of these programs and divisions. And then these are just some projects that were able to be initiated during that time. Many of which were with specific, with helpful research collaboratives, or collaborative researchers that have really taken the time to build relationships and work with us to co-develop these projects. And there are so many more. Specifically, you'll notice here, we started the Piddish plant. So that's what I'm doing now, although I've worn different hats as a technician, and then worked in K-12 environmental ed. And we are kind of picking up with some of the work that Vicki and Kathy and Jennifer started with the ACA, this agroecosystem assessment that kind of was built off of the food groves and the food security project. So let's see if I can figure out where the next, So yeah, we're just now 2 years into building our Piddish plants division, where we are doing, again, still collaborative work as part of the collaborative stewardship program. At Kaduk DNR, we work with local nonprofits and as a part of the Western Klamath Restoration Partnership, and working on invasive species removal, but also native plant enhancement. Yeah, I think I might be toggling back and forth back to the beginning again. So yeah, that's mostly what I wanted to share.
Great. Thank you, Heather. That was wonderful. And then if you could bring Kathy on, we're moving right along. Thank you.
Okay, I believe I have just a few minutes. So my name is Kathy McCovey. Is somebody going to help me change this? Sure. I retired. I just want to throw this out. I worked for the U.S. Forest Service for about 45 years. And in that, I was in timber prep. I was in silviculture. I was a silviculturalist. I worked on fires, etc. So when I retired from the U.S. Forest Service in 2014, I began to work with the Karuk tribe in their projects when this was just coming on board. They were just starting to work with the Berkeley group. And go ahead. One of the things that I wanted to say is I'm very, very thankful for the Berkeley group and our collaboration with Karuk tribe, because they helped really to break down barriers, to break down walls. The way that the people in the agencies, and particularly U.S. Forest Service, had, when I worked for them, had felt was timber was king. That's what they were going to focus on. And me being a silviculturalist, I wasn't real good for, because I was always paying attention to the other plants. I was like, we've been doing timber, we've been doing forestry and timber management for 40 years. We're very good at it. But what we need to learn and what we need to do is we need to manage what we have left after we removed the conifers. And the Berkeley Collaborative and the Cuttock Tribe working together, in my opinion, as a forester, it's been fantastic. We were able to change the mental shift of the agencies to allow us to manage our foods. We live in a food forest. It is not a fiber forest. And that is something very important, and people don't realize it. We are in a small rural community. The plants out there that we utilize are important to our food resources. We don't have much food, especially in the Orleans market. They don't have food. No, the Happy Camp market's a little bit better, but the food's a little bit older. So our health and our vitality and our culture depends on the stewardship that we have had in the past for generations of this land, and that we continue to have. Food, agroforestry, and especially working with the Berkeley group, has led to stewardship, where we're beginning to go out and actually manage the lands with the Forest Service, manage the lands with the other agencies. And that stewardship from a kind of perspective results in food sovereignty. So I cannot explain and much difference that the Berkeley Collaborative has made in Kuruk country. And people like Frank and Jennifer and all the folks working, each time they worked with us, I even learned a lot. So it was an exchange of information, a new perspective at looking at how to manage the land. And this, if you look at Phoebe Maddox's 1932 ethnographic interview, I think you might have had a chance to look through this. These are different bulbs that we've been gathering that are laying on this paper where she has this information about bulbs and how they manage the forest. Go ahead. Agroforestry is, for me, it's a multi-species management. If you see this picture on the left, we have Douglas fir being planted. You're looking at a harvested unit. You can tell by the young Douglas fir, and lower you can tell there's a lot of tan oak coming up. So along our river corridors, my friend Heather Pusum worked for the U.S. Forest Service as an archaeologist. She worked with me, and she did her study on use of fire by the Kuruk tribe, the historic use, prehistoric use, and in her study, she found about a 3-mile radius was managed for a fine grain mosaic, and that was around the villages and along the river corridor. Beyond that was another 2-mile radius, and that was managed that's the thermal belt. If you ever look at our landscape and topography, this makes perfect sense. The management of these species in zones. Getting back to the mid slope, the thermal belt, that's where we manage our tan oak trees that give us tan oak mushroom and acorns. And that's where the animals love to be a lot of time, the elk and the deer. And beyond that, so you're 5 miles out from your village site with intensive management. Beyond that, you're starting to get into the high country. And we use fire as a tool. And each of these zones were burned at different rotations, at different times, depending on the plants that you wanted to inhibit or encourage. Getting back to that high country zone, that area in there that's where our true firs really grow, is up in our higher country. And that fire regime up there was a combination of burning along the trails, burning to keep the meadows open, deer browse. If you work in your fires, if you set your fires in the fall when you're coming back down off the mountain, then in the springtime, you know where the animals are going to be. They're going to be in those meadows. On the right-hand side, we have a sugar pine tree. Sugar pine was very important. And Phoebe Maddox says in her 1932 ethnography that the tribes around Somes Bar, especially from the people of Somes Bar, the Kuruk tribe, especially in the village of Ishipish, one of their main foods for the winter was the sugar pine and the manzanita. And in an area we have to do agroforestry. We have to use our fire to keep the Douglas fir from encroaching on our sugar pine stands. So agroforestry we've always been doing it.
To me, Kathy froze.
Yeah, she's
Stephanie,
frozen for me too.
Uh-oh.
Mhm.
Let's see. If not, I'll try to text. I guess we'll wait for a minute. Hopefully the DNR, sometimes the server there doesn't have quite the bandwidth. I'm wondering, I'll give it a few more seconds, and if a few, half a minute here, if it doesn't happen, then we'll change over to Stephanie. But looks like they got dropped. Well, sorry to lose them at DNR. Kathy, I'll text Heather or call her on her cell phone. But Stephanie, if you'd like to come on in, we'll go on to your presentation and we'll just keep going here.
Everyone. Hi. Thank you. Okay. Well, I just want to pause and thank Kathy so much. I feel like that was a perfect segue into this presentation. I am going to be, and my dog is here, so I'm sorry if you hear her. Okay. Here we go. I'm sharing my screen. All right, wonderful. And I'm going to drop my the link to the slides in the chat, just in case anyone would prefer to pin the video of the translator or make their video larger. That way you can follow along at whatever pace or whatever your access needs may be today. So hello, Dagote. Hello, my name is Stephanie Gutierrez. I'm a San Carlos Apache tribal member. And I'm the Forest and Community Program Director at EcoTrust. And I'm going to provide just a little bit of context for who we are and where our project is situated. So the Forest and Ecosystem Services team, what we do here at EcoTrust is to advance climate smart forestry and Indigenous forest stewardship. And we do this through a variety of different tools. Some of my team members are, they work with advanced GIS, remote sensing, and data science. All of us work together on co-production research. So that means that we are co-producing research together with the communities and partners and tribes that we are working with. We are co-creating questions and co-creating methods and measurement and evaluation together. We also engage with movement building and storytelling and communication. And I'm here to talk to you today about our Indigenous agroforestry project. So this project was started a few years ago, but even before that, it was part of a Pacific Northwest tribal agroforestry working group. And this working group developed a series of roundtable discussions where tribal agroforestry practitioners, foresters, and natural resource staff were invited to participate in discussions around like, what is Indigenous agroforestry? How does this show up in your communities? And what are some of those different topics and challenges that you are engaging with? And what can we do? What are some action items of that to help support you in your work? And so this project is a direct response to those roundtable discussions. During those roundtable discussions, a request was to center partnerships and relationship building, especially among federal partners, to create a space to connect and communicate with fellow practitioners and tribal members, to help build that sense of community and shared understanding around what is Indigenous agroforestry. And then also to connect partners and other organizations to provide technical assistance to tribes, whether that be through grant writing, forest modeling, or in teaching different types of agroforestry practices as defined by the National Agroforestry Center, or USDA, for example. Our project is 2 years old, and these are our three main goals through this project. So we want to increase access to programs and services related to agroforestry for tribes and practitioners. The different USDA programs and services that support agroforestry they come from a wide variety of different types of USDA programs. It's not just one singular program, so it is interdisciplinary in nature. We want to support connection and community among practitioners, and then also provide technical assistance to tribes in forest modeling that can better center traditional gathering and management practices in our different forest treatments. This particular program is funded by the USDA NEFA's American Rescue Plan Technical Assistance Investment to benefit underserved farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners. We have some wonderful partners. It is not just me and EcoTrust and my team doing this alone. The National Agroforestry Center, Intertribal Nursery Council, Pacific Southwest Research Station, Oregon State University, Heritage University, the Hoopa Valley Tribe, Cal Poly Humboldt's Food Sovereignty Lab, Washington State University's Extension, and the Forest Service. And so before I launch further into talking about some of the specifics about our project, I want to ground us in what are some tangible examples of Indigenous agroforestry. And so what you're seeing here on the left is a visual that is describing the natural resource conservation sciences 5 agroforestry practices: riparian buffers, silval pasture, forest farming, alley cropping, windbreaks, and those are in the darker green. We wanted to make sure that the visual shows the interconnectedness and what is at the center of this web, and that is our traditional gathering and management practices. We also added in an additional practice, which is fire use, since fire stewardship is really central to Indigenous land management, and it is a component of Indigenous agroforestry. And as it was mentioned earlier, agroforestry is, for a Western context, is relatively a new term, right? Where you're managing for multi-use objectives. It's a system and set of practices. However, for tribes and Indigenous groups, we have been practicing these types of land management practices that are managing for plants, animals, and fungi, are culturally specific foods and materials since time immemorial, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And across not just the US, right, across the world, across the globe, Indigenous people have been utilizing these types of systems and practices to support their lifeways. And so some tangible examples that I can provide of Indigenous agroforestry practices that you may see, especially in the Northwestern United States: the tending of huckleberry bushes, the harvest of bark off of cedar trees, cedar root pulling, and the harvest of other many types of roots, especially in the early spring, to feed our communities. And you can visit our story map and our Indigenous agroforestry website with that QR code right there. And I'm going to drop the website link in the chat for you, just to learn more about Indigenous agroforestry and different resources that are available to you. So as I was mentioned earlier, we engage in co-production. So this survey is what is grounding our project and helping our project be shaped by self-identified Indigenous agroforestry practitioners, tribal members, descendants, and those who work closely with tribes in this field. And so the survey, if you would like, and if that sounds like the audience is you, please go ahead and take the survey. This will help inform the different programs and opportunities that not only support Indigenous agroforestry, but also the types of events, networking opportunities, and learning spaces that we're going to be co-creating through the Indigenous Agroforestry Network. And the survey closes June 10th. So please share widely with your network there. And this network, it is the intention of this network is to improve the mutual understanding and cooperation between Indigenous agroforestry practitioners, tribes, and other allied partners. Although it is Northwest based, we do welcome collaboration across the U.S. And we are focused on building trust and relationship building, and also to co-create those events, programs, workspaces for knowledge sharing and learning as well. And the QR codes there on the left will take you to both our website and our Instagram too. We do have a social media presence, so please follow us. And again, there's more information about the project and how to get involved. There's a mailing list with the newsletter, and then other learning resources. Sorry, I think it froze. Okay. Well, I'm at time too, so that actually works out. Well, thank you so much. And I'll turn it back to Frank to kick off the questions and answer period.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was wonderful. I appreciate the overview of the project and how we're growing from kind of our lessons learned with Karuk and UC Berkeley Collaborative and other tribes, and then now expanding it out and kind of really looking at that. Just for the Karuk update, they're not able to use their video, but for Vicky, Heather, and Kathy, they should be back on board and are going to be listening.
Oh, I think Frank may have frozen here.
Yes, he has.
All right. Well, I will just echo this. I have been getting so many emails and messages from attendees who are really thankful and appreciative of the information that you've been sharing. So if all of the speakers want to come on the camera, Frank, feel free to jump back in if you
Hey, it's Vicky.
get connection again.
Our video says that we can't start because the host has stopped it.
All right, thanks. I think Pamela can help with that. So maybe.
Okay, I did not do anything. I guess Zoom just doesn't want us to be great this afternoon.
Yeah. All right, and I can go ahead and start the Q&A session until Frank gets back. And Vicky, are you able to, is it allowing you to start your camera again?
No. Audio though.
All right. Okay, great. That's all right. All right, so we have a lot of questions. Here, I'll just get us kicked off. What were the primary policy barriers that you identified in your research? Or that you experienced in general?
I'm happy to start, but I would love to have Frank and Vicky chime in as well. I mean, I think there's just, based on the history of the land, being predominantly within the Federal Forest Service lands, there's just a lot of policies related to restrictions on access, ability to steward through the use of fire, and, a number of other challenges that the tribes have been working on for some time. I think other barriers around knowledge sovereignty, universities tend to have pretty strict data ownership policies. And so, working with, on some of those challenges at the university level as well to try to change that, to move more toward the data sharing approach. Vicky or Frank, if you'd like to add.
Yeah, I'll just go real quick. Agree with what Jenny said. I think for some of the work that I think directly related to the food security projects and all that, things like what Jenny was saying with Karuk Aboriginal territory is largely on Forest Service. So public national land. We don't have a reservation or large land base. So we run into a lot of issues with that sovereignty piece of being able to practice cultural, traditional, religious practices, gathering practices on our land. Fire stewardship is a huge one. Having fishing rights across our Aboriginal territory and hunting rights all really affect food security, food sovereignty for us. So there's a lot of stuff within the legal policy realm that really does affect tribal sovereignty, continues to and has in the past.
Frank, you are back. The question was, what are some of the major policy barriers? So if your internet is back, you can also chime in. All right, it sounds like your internet might still be unstable. But any other...
Jessica.
Yeah, great.
You'll have to pass on me. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Any other thoughts on that before we go to the next question? All right, so the next question is, what is the role of retail food outlets and food markets in both food security and food sovereignty?
I'm happy to start. The presentation that I shared really centered around native foods, but we also had a very large component looking at general access to healthy foods. So we had students who carried out research up and down the Klamath Basin, visiting all the different retail stores. And I don't have the statistics in front of me, but the quality and condition of fresh fruits and vegetables were significantly of poor quality. Many of the stores in the Klamath Basin are far removed from central places of food production, standard, the conventional food production. So yeah, all of the retail outlets are vital to providing access to healthy foods. I'd like to defer to the folks who are living in Orleans to share a little bit about the challenges that you face around the stores that you have.
What was I couldn't quite hear. What was the question?
Yeah, no problem. So the question is, what is the role of retail food outlets and food market in food security and food safety?
None. They don't. When we had COVID, there was no food in the market. The living, and most people don't shop at the local markets like Happy Camp in Orleans. They'll go to Wairika or to Medford, actually, and that's 2.5 hours away. So even to go get good dairy products, or you don't even want to eat the chicken that you get in the store in Happy Camp. Its shelf life is pretty bad already. So they don't really have a place because we don't really use the stores. Their food is out of date. I quit buying yogurt and Happy Camp because it would be like 3 months out of date. So the foods are not quality. The fruit and vegetables are usually not ripe. The produce, the milk and stuff is not good, and the prices are so high. It is almost impossible to really do shopping there if you're a family. The food that we have out in the forest, especially like, let's take elderberries, for example. You can go out and you can spend, half a day picking elderberries. You don't even have to spend that long because they're big umbels, and they're just the way our food grows, our food forest grows is it can grow massive amounts of food off of one bush. And that's what the Berkeley Collaborative helped with, is we taught people how to make grape juice out of the wild grapes. We taught them how to make elderberry juice out of the elderberries, how to can, how to fix our food, so that, because we know and we feel, we can tell by the condition of our people that the foods that are in the system that we are dependent on they're not good food, and they're not dependable, actually. So if we spend time, and our forest is a food forest, we go out in the fall time, we gather those resources, we can them, we dry them, we store them. We go out in the spring, we gather those resources, we can them, we dry them, we store them. We go out in the summer and back in the fall. I was raised by my grandparents, and we were always out gathering. So there is fish in the river now, hopefully more since the dams went down. There are elk now. The agencies, the Forest Service, didn't want to reintroduce elk for a long time because they were afraid they'd eat the little trees. For so long, our people have been starved. Basically, we have not been allowed to practice our culture because our lands were taken over by the Forest Service, and our food forests were turned into fiber forests. And so now, with the help of Berkeley, with the USDA Tribal Relations Collaborative, that's changing, and it's changing for the better, for the health of our people. But there are jobs out in the forest, the agroforest, the managing the forest in holistically, not just taking one species, Douglas fir, and giving it the advantage of all the other plants. So our gathering, our canning, our processing, our drying, those fill the gaps of a food system that does not meet the needs of rural nor native communities. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments? I think we have time for one more question. And I let Frank choose it. Oh, Frank, are you able to hop on yet? That's right. Okay, one last question. Remember, everyone, to stay on after the last question because we are going to do an evaluation poll. But how are you already facing or preparing for natural resource concerns due to climate change?
One of the ways is that we're looking at climate change, and it's going to be hotter and it's going to be drier. That is the prediction. So we're looking, basically, you can look back in the past too, actually. If you look at tree rings or pre-contact information about the plants that survived during the last heating of the environment. And that's what we're going through, is a drought, and the environment's going to heat up. So you want to choose trees and plants that are let's say hardwoods. When you come to heating and dryness, and especially with all these storms that are happening down in the Gulf of Mexico, and they're traveling up through California, we have intensive lightning storms. And I think for us, a lot of that climate change is going to come in terms of fire. And if we take a look at the kind of strategy and we've been in our lands for thousands of years, for management, fine grain mosaic around your village sites, a little bit farther out, 2 to 3 mile fine grain mosaic, that's the oak woodlands and grasslands. Then your thermal belt, which is your tan oaks, then your mountain peaks. If we can use fire as a tool to manipulate the vegetation, to harden, to make our forest more resilient to receive fire. I think that'll be one of the things that's going to come at us, and it has been for years now, is these fires. These fires will start out, we'll get a thunderstorm come through, 1,000 lightning strikes, and a lot of them take, but they manage, they'll manage the fires that are around the towns and villages, but the fires that are further out, they'll start coming at us in August and September. They'll start eating their way towards town. So if we have managed in that mosaic with multiple species in different seral stages, and especially with a 2 or 3 mile radius around the village, when that fire comes in and it's being pushed by the wind, those fires are on the average spotting 1.5 miles ahead of each other. So that's why we have such a hard time keeping up with those fires, because they're spotting ahead of each other. When those fires come out of the wilderness and into our village, Orleans, the Karuk country, we'll be ready, because our area will be ready to receive fire, and fire for us will not be that devastating. And that's one of the main things I can think that's going to endanger us and our plants and our plant communities, our ecosystem, is those fires coming at me. I'll just right off the top of my head, that's what I think we're going to get from a warming and drying climate. So be prepared, be managed. And I'll tell you what, conifers, if a fire goes through an area, those conifers are going to be dead. They're standing dead trees that you have to deal with for years into the future. That ain't your best bet. Investing in conifers is not your best bet. Investing in hardwoods, investing in tree species that have shown themselves to basically survive fires the best. And they produce acorns for the people. Our tan oak's perfect example. Acorns for the people in the fall, mushrooms for the people, and the deer and the animals. When you move further into fall and hit in winter, you know, our system is very it's very robust. It's very, it can bounce back from damage if we're able to manage it that way. And the European management, the Forest Service management of conifer above everything else, that's what's gotten in this deficit of food. That's also what has gotten into this really dangerous zone of having even-aged conifer stands surrounding all of our villages. Because once that fire gets in there, you can't stop it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Anything else before we wrap up? All right, I am going to, yeah, go ahead, Stephanie.
I just wanted to highlight what Frank had said in the chat here. And I think that this is also a tool and a method that we can use to address climate change. And so honoring tribal data sovereignty over ecological cultural data. So remote, and that could be remote sensing to forestry plots. That's something that our team has been working on. And remote sensing to forestry plots can support tribal co-management, co-stewardship governance, the co-production of knowledge, such as the Indigenous and Western knowledge shared here informs management. And so I think like utilizing forest models to help identify appropriate treatments, making sure that when we are identifying those treatments that we are making sure that the community is describing and guiding what types of treatments, and not in, you know, what the scientific Western composition and structure of a forest is, but really getting out there with the community and asking, you know, what are you observing? What are you noticing? What have you seen throughout your lifetime? And having those stories and those discussions, those are equally as important as those hard science numbers.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for highlighting that.
I was also just going to add to some, for us here at Karuk DNR, for our Piddish plants, I know programmatically, we're planning to kind of be able to increase capacity for plant mapping within, so that more tribal community members are involved in kind of identifying what plant populations are where, and looking for, just bring more tribal people into like that with state and nonprofit partners in mapping what plants are where and considering how we can benefit those populations among like along traditional kind of plant population movement patterns. I know like Nick here just walked in. He's really good at like paying attention. Sorry, Nick, but like to which like for grasslands and what areas, that we might be able to move them in to prevent invasive species, being active about just honoring certain those relationships that people have with places and plants, related to what Kathy is saying. Also related to that, we are just getting involved in this Klamath Meadows partnership and interested in trying to restore wet meadows. And again, kind of on a community scale to bring more people into, with Met Meadows, as these kind of green glaciers in our area. I'm also thinking of some other projects to just ensure that local tribal youth are really informed and engaging with those indicator species that are in our climate adaptation plan. I'm wondering if can people hear me? Okay, thanks. So that everyone's included in paying attention to what plants and what animals should be where, so that we can help them out. That was all.
End of report.
Right. Thank you all so much. So I'm going to try and channel Frank here. First of all, I want to thank Frank. Thank you so much for organizing this webinar, for moderating. And I'm so sorry your internet went out. Unstable internet is just kind of a name of the game these days. But thank you so much to our speakers. Jennifer, Vicky, Heather, Kathy, Stephanie, we're so grateful for you joining us. And we have a evaluation poll that we're going to put up. So please, if you don't mind, taking a moment to fill that out. It helps us as we're planning for our next webinars, and it gives us kind of some insight into what we're doing well, what we need to improve for the future. So we appreciate all of the attendees. I'm so sorry we didn't get to all of the questions. We had so many questions from people. I wish we had more time, but we will be saving all of the questions, sending them to the servers. So your questions will get read and heard. And anyone has any additional questions, thoughts, if you look in the chat, some of our panelists are putting their email in there. You can reach out to them directly. You can always reach out to me, and I'll share your question with the person who might be able to answer. So everyone, fill out that poll, and we will see you again at our next webinar.
USDA is an equal opportunity provider, employer, and lender.